Okay, well, welcome to another edition of the AI Infrastructure Roundtable. I'm Peter Murray, your host, and today I'd like to welcome Tyler Svitak from the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. Hello, Tyler.
Hey, good to see you again.
Well, today it's really more about you telling the story of the Smart Cities Alliance and how innovation is created. So I'm really going to talk to you for a minute about talk about your overall, how you manage an ecosystem that's always evolving. What's your biggest challenge when you wake up in the morning?
I'm thankful to have many challenges when I wake up in the morning running this organization. But, I think the biggest challenge is keeping everyone at the table engaged and providing value. Um, I guess not everyone knows necessarily what I do day to day, but, I run a nonprofit ecosystem called the Smart Cities Alliance here in Colorado. And it's really anchored by local and state government. So keeping them at the table and providing value to them is challenge number one. But of course, we have a couple of other legs to that stool, which are the solution providers, the AI companies that want to solve government problems. And then the third leg, of course, is everyone else, nonprofits, researchers. And so this organization that I get to run has to figure out how to keep everyone at the table and providing value. We've been doing that now for 8 years.
And just on top of that, what has AI added to the mix? Is it fear? Is it excitement? Combination of all the above? What's your takeaway now that there's sort of a mania around AI?
Well, it is a mania. I think AI has invigorated this, what I'm calling smart cities industry for 2 years now. And I think government understands and can really tangibly see how AI can improve day-to-day operations. We have leaders, mayors and elected officials that are pressuring their staff to look at AI. City of Denver and Mayor Johnston just hosted the Den AI Summit for its second year, which is the first city-hosted AI conference focused on how to improve government. And so there's a lot of excitement, which gets people to the table to think about how AI can be a new tool for them. It gets sexy whenever you start implementing, and that's where we spend most of our time, is in what are the use cases and the problems that we can solve, and how can we apply tools to actually solve it, and that's where the fun is.
Well, good. Well, I admire the work you all do. You've built a strong ecosystem, and you have you've got tangible output, which in many cases is hard. We don't see anything beyond pilots. So that said, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for you to go ahead and tell your story, and I'm going to remove myself from the picture. So thank you very much for joining us today, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter. And I appreciate the opportunity. I think you wanted us to talk a little bit about some specific AI use cases that we see in our industry here in Colorado with real projects that we're working on, and then the complexities around implementation of AI. And so I've got a little bit of content here to share of what we're up to, and then I hope we can continue this discussion. So the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance, to give you all some context, we are a nonprofit charitable organization here in the state of Colorado. And my job is really to create technology partnerships between local and state governments, to really prove what the next generation of technology solutions can do for improving our state. We were the first and are now the nation's largest statewide coalition doing this work. And it's really anchored by, like I said, local and state government. So these are our primary customers. We call them members, but these are the cities and counties, library districts, airports, utilities, all sorts of different jurisdictions with different needs. Our job is to try to understand those needs and to pair them. Think of them as the demand side of a marketplace for innovation in government, with the supply side. What's possible? What are the technology tools that cities have available to them to tackle different problems, from housing to public safety to transportation? So it's a pretty diverse group that I get to work with across the state and solving a lot of different problems. For those of you that aren't familiar with smart cities, there are a million definitions out there. I think what we really try to focus on is the nexus between government innovation, which is changing something in government. That could be policy, that could be lots of things. And then technology innovation. What are the newest technology tools available to government? And that is the nexus by which the smart cities industry really came into being. It used to be IoT, that was the tool. Automation and robotics, 5G, and today we're talking about artificial intelligence because that is the newest tool and one of the most promising that cities can use. We start all of our conversations around AI, not with AI, but with a problem. And within government, if you've ever worked in government, or I guess everyone has experienced government, there are a lot of things to do and a lot of opportunities to improve things. These are 6 of the major themes that we work on that governments tell us they are looking for innovation around. Transportation and mobility being number 1, but we also work on all sorts of other issues from public safety to housing to environmental sustainability, and now just the use of data is a major theme in and of itself. And interestingly, when we work with these jurisdictions and try to focus on a problem, I haven't found a problem that we haven't been able to apply AI to yet to at least change something, if not improve it. I struggle to focus on specific use cases for AI because they are anecdotal at this point. I literally cannot think of something that AI could not be applied to. But a handful of specific projects that we have been working on with our jurisdictions here in Colorado recently, I'll go through a few of them. So infrastructure assessment is a big responsibility of most jurisdictions, whether it's our roads or sidewalks, streetlights, or underground water infrastructure, as an example. Or if you're an airport, you've got really precise pavement conditions that you need to monitor. And those assessments have historically been done by human beings, and still can be. But if you were to map all 3,300 miles of sidewalk across the city and county of Denver, it takes a lot of time. And those assessments can't be done very regularly. However, as a result, they're quite expensive. We've seen a lot of promise from the combination of sensors and artificial intelligence to begin doing these assessments much more quickly, much more accurately, and therefore much more often. So something like potholes, for example, can become very evident before you get a call from the public, or you can identify cracks and alligator cracking or pavement condition index ratings in a very reliable way, in a very quick way. And so we actually have, I think, 5 jurisdictions now that are using some sort of artificial intelligence solution for the condition of pavement, and the identification of road hazards like potholes. And then we are also looking at ways to use similar technology to assess the condition of sidewalks that have their own unique data that they need to inspect. We also have another company called InfraSmart that is using similar technology, the CCTV camera footage from inside of water infrastructure to assess potential defects in that infrastructure. And turns out cities have full-time engineers that are reviewing the insides of water pipes, looking for these defects, instead of focusing on how to fix them and prioritize maintenance of those issues. So one of these companies that we'll talk more about is applying artificial intelligence to that camera footage and identifying these defects much more quickly and accurately. There's a lot happening in transportation, right? In the field of intelligent transportation systems is not new. We've been using cameras and IoT sensors to help improve the intelligence of our infrastructure for a long time. However, the application of artificial intelligence over those sensors has brought a lot of additional value into our transportation sector. And one specific use case that has been challenging in the industry for a while that one of our companies, Grid Matrix, has been able to overcome is the ability to apply artificial intelligence to what are called pan tilt zoom cameras or PTZ cameras that are moving. So an operator can take a camera and focus it on an incident, for example, and zoom into it. The artificial intelligence has a problem or has had a problem with the ability to apply that AI when the camera has moved and to get it back into the exact position in order for that AI to work. In this case, Grid Matrix has overcome that and been able to apply that to pan tilt zoom cameras. And so you can identify, for example, a broken down vehicle. You could identify near misses with cameras. There's lots of different use cases for improving transportation safety with AI and sensors. And then one that I hadn't thought about before, but it shows you the diversity of ways that AI could be applied, is actually with wildlife conflict management. So today, airports and highways, railways, for example, have major conflicts with birds at airports, for example, or wildlife in highways. One of the leading causes of death in rural areas here in Colorado on our roadways is collisions with livestock or with wildlife like deer. And so there's a company called Phlox that we have supported through our Business Accelerator program that's using sensors and artificial intelligence in order to identify a specific species of animal, and then combining either drones or other mechanisms for what's called bioacoustics, where you can actually communicate with the animal and scare them, deter them away from wherever that conflict zone might be. And so this is being applied in a couple of different areas here in Colorado. They have a project with Denver International Airport to deter birds, and they are also partnering with the state of Colorado to try and deter wolves from ranches, as that is a major political headache right now in the state. And we're seeing real results. So, just this one project with the city and county of Denver just got additional funding in the form of a grant to expand it beyond the first pilot. But they have found, $360,000 has been saved annually for the city and county of Denver so far. It's been 6 times faster in assessing and annotating those in-office sewer assessments that the engineers were doing manually. And they've seen 99% accuracy in the defect identification that they have been able to log. And to further illustrate the diversity of different use cases that AI is being applied to, New Real AI is a company, a member of ours. They develop and train algorithms to really any type of event that you might want to detect with a sensor. In this case, they're using cameras, and they have, in the last 18 months, secured contracts with 3 different jurisdictions tackling 3 different areas, one of which is real-time crash notification. So they, with the city of Greeley, have deployed 4 smart Juganu lightheads with cameras and New Real's AI to detect real-time crashes, and then also communicate directly with 911 to notify dispatch of the crash severity to hasten the speed of response. They're also looking at near misses of intersections to try and predict where crashes may occur before they do. The same company is looking at people movement patterns across both parks and recreation facilities. So Jefferson County is going to be using them to assess how parks are used by different people, whether there are parking spots available, for example. And then in library districts. So they're using artificial intelligence to assess how people move throughout libraries, and then have built a digital twin of that library to assess if we were to move this collection over to this area, for example, or adjust our tables, like what would that usage pattern look like, and scenario plan the future of what libraries could look like. And then finally, sometimes, actually often, instead of defining what the solution is, we just define the problem and allow the industry to tell us how they might solve these problems using technology and innovation. And so this year, we held our Connected Colorado Challenge, which takes a problem that was submitted and voted on by our cities and counties across the state and advertises it for innovation to the private sector. And so these are three specific problems that we've been looking at. Asset management for accessibility. So how do we better inventory and manage things like sidewalks or bike lanes or curb ramps? Streamlining the development process. So the development review and approval process of new housing, for example. How do we improve that? And then finally, how do we just reimagine the services that government provides to bring more of them into a digital experience and improve our constituent engagement? And so all three of these have been receiving a lot of different ideas from companies across the world for how mostly AI could be applied to these three problem areas. These are the communities that participated in review of these applications. These are large communities, City of Denver, for example, smaller communities, library districts, and they're all assessing how AI could be applied. And we received about 40 applications across all three of these challenge areas. Asset management for accessibility, we got all sorts of solutions from strapping LiDAR onto scooters or bicycles and applying AI to that sensor in order to get slope angle and curb cut and specific location information about the condition of our sidewalk infrastructure. Streamlining development, it's astonishing how many companies, how quickly they have come into this space. I think we had all 11 of those applications pretty much were companies either applying AI or about to apply AI to the development and permit review process, either customer facing or so before you submit your application for an ADU, for example, do you have all of the required information? To the back end of a plan reviewer, like can you use AI to better assess and more quickly assess applications that come in? This is a very rapidly growing space for AI in government that ideally will lower the cost of housing and increase the housing stock. And then all sorts of wonderful new ideas for reimagining digital services. Ideas like what if you don't even need a website anymore? What if you have an agent that is able to help your community members with whatever it is that they need? And lots of cool ideas there.
Before you go on, I thought I could do it and let you fully complete, but I can't. So please go back. Yeah, it's interesting with your, the data you've got here with the 40 companies, because number one is not a space I've really seen or I'm playing, but in 2 and 3, the streamlining of the infrastructure and development, and it jumped off the page at me that telecommunications and telecom permitting, which has been around forever, is still a mess in terms of standards and practice, et cetera. And it's always pointed at as a delay, whether it's a tower or it's a fiber or whatever it is. Anyone in that space looking at that? Because I can tell you that in Florida alone, there's $870 million left over from the BEAD program. Mm. And if it's allowed to flow through, if it is allowed to flow through, one of the areas they're going to focus on is permitting. And that could be a big bundle of cash out there in 50 different states. And so my long question, but is anyone in that space looking at telecom permitting and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Most of these tools could be applied to really any permitting process, whether you're installing new construction for housing or whether you are installing a new fiber line, right? You're simply taking existing regulations and rules, maybe BIM drawings or building information models or, models of what this is going to look like and comparing the two, and then, citing regulation or zoning code or whatever in order to review these things more quickly. So we had one company that, we haven't announced winners for this yet. We're in the final deliberation process, but one of them is being considered for underground water infrastructure utilities, for example. Very similar to what broadband would have to go through as well.
And so you mentioned, it's really these AI principles of building the model, et cetera, that's just being overlaid to existing challenges. But it's largely smaller software related folks doing this, smaller companies attacking these individual issues, or what are you seeing?
I think the innovation often starts in the startup community. But I just read today that OpenGov, which is a pretty big company at this point, just won a new development contract for improving San Francisco's development review process. So I think that it's beginning there, and we happen to have an ecosystem of a lot of startups where this innovation occurs. But pretty quickly, I think you'll see that these larger companies are going to either acquire them or change their own business models to align here.
So it's similar to a lot of the innovation cycles that we've lived through. These younger entrepreneurs or even experienced folks are applying this new technological capability, and it's how fast and how efficiently you can innovate and promote.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know that a large company is necessarily going to see the opportunity for local government permit review until it's proven. And that's happening today.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I won't interrupt anymore. I'll let you finish up. But that was sort of the key takeaway that I wanted to maybe hear from you, is just how that ecosystem develops. And the takeaway is it happens anecdotally and in a flow that starts happening pretty quick. So these younger companies need to get this exposure and get out there quickly. And I guess that's what you're offering them here.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, we're offering big companies the same opportunity, right? But I don't know that I've seen from most big companies the innovation that will make them competitive in this space. For example, we had a couple of larger, more established firms in this asset management for accessibility space submit this year, and what they're doing just isn't really that innovative, and so they weren't selected to move forward. So, which I love. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm old enough to remember how we built the internet, right? In those early stages and all the different theories. And very often the real innovations happened with the very small, generally with some experience and understood the challenge and then applied the newer technologies, right?
Yeah, and before I finish my last slide, which I just showed you briefly, I think one of the things that we're learning through this process and through the development of projects with AI right now is we're trying to apply artificial intelligence to existing old process. And in a lot of cases, that's not necessarily the best use of AI, or may not solve the problem in its entirety. The process might be flawed in and of itself. And so simply digitizing it and applying AI to it may not get you the right results. In the case of streamlining development, for example, communities are having to think really long and hard about whether the process they've designed is the right process to begin with, and whether AI can fundamentally change and transform how development occurs in cities. And so I think that's a good thing. It's also a really challenging thing, and it takes a lot of time for communities to consider this. And I think it's slowing down a lot of progress for AI to go from pilot to commercialization, not just in government, but in the private sector as well, from what I've been seeing and reading. And so that's definitely a barrier, is the process right from the beginning? Applying AI to it may not be the golden ticket. So a few hot topics that hopefully will allow us to continue the discussion here, Peter, but certainly something for people to know. Data quality and data governance are definitely becoming more and more important. Anyone that's worked in this space understands the importance of data quality. The private sector certainly does, and they treat data like a resource, like an asset that's very valuable. I think governments see the opportunity for AI, which is making the data underpinning that service or the AI is going to be applied to even more important. So it makes it messy, because AI could take the decision-making process further away from that data. And so, CIOs, for example, or CDOs, chief data officers, are sometimes wary about getting into AI because they understand that the quality of their data isn't where it needs to be to really rely on the decisions that AI is going to help you to make. So unsexy things like data infrastructure are becoming more sexy, and the governance around who has access to that data, which also kind of gets into this human in the loop thing. Are we simply using AI as a tool to assess or to help humans make better decisions? Or is AI going to be making these decisions themselves? As an example of this, in our streamlining development process challenge, we saw companies that were proposing, actually issuing permits. That's a decision that would be made by the AI versus simply comparing and contrasting plans versus codes and more quickly providing the right information to both the applicant and the reviewer to make a decision by a human. So is AI going to be doing things for us, or is it going to be just simply improving the decisions that humans already make? And then bringing AI to the edge has really brought down the cost. Also increased the speed of things like transportation use cases, as we talked about. No longer do you have to depend on getting information to and from the cloud, which increases your communication costs as well as your storage costs. These decisions are being made at the edge, so the AI is embedded into that sensor, and you're just getting the events or the metadata that you are asking for from the edge. This also increases privacy for sensitive use cases, and so that's definitely enabling a lot more AI conversations by lowering the cost and increasing privacy. And then finally, security. The further you get from where a decision is made, for example, if you're embedding AI into the edge and you're having your traffic signal make a decision about signal timing or whatever, you may not necessarily know exactly how that decision was made, or if someone were to infiltrate your security protocol and make a decision, you may not know because those devices are communicating to each other at the edge and not necessarily to your central system where you're going to be monitoring for things like cybersecurity leaks. And so we have seen many of our communities really struggle to pilot some of these AI technologies because of really justifiably so intense security protocols for hanging new devices or integrating new AI systems into their cybersecurity protocol. So there are a few things that we have learned in many of the projects that we talked about, and happy to continue the chat, Peter.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to get rid of the slides and bring us up close and personal here. You presented a whole lot of really logical components to innovation. And I started sort of with my last question first about, your challenges in the beginning. But, pulling this ecosystem together is very, very difficult. And you have some peers around the country. I know if you want to talk a little bit about the national level where you guys cooperate, because I think that is the essence of what you bring locally and then nationally. And it's very important that these lessons learned with AI and these successful young companies, they get adopted and folks iterate, right, and moves forward. So talk a little bit about how you collaborate on a national level and then how that helps generate innovation.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we're an ecosystem collaborating at the state level, but what works here could also work elsewhere, and vice versa. What works in Texas could work here. And so we've done a really intentional job to try and connect the regional initiatives happening across the country into one national platform. And this is an organization called the National Smart Coalitions Partnership. And there are 5 regions across the country that are all doing this regional innovation work with cities. You've got Texas, you've got the Kansas City, Missouri area, you've got the state of Illinois, you've got Arizona and Colorado. So we hosted a national webinar earlier this year, identifying and highlighting specific use cases where cities are using AI across all 5 of those regions. We had really small communities in rural Illinois. We had the largest municipalities in some of our states, and it really highlighted the diversity of ways that anyone in any type of community could really be looking at AI as a tool to solve different problems. And it provides a national network for companies that want to solve those problems to try and access.
Well, I admire the work you do, and I brought it up. I was in Raleigh this week at their Connected Triangle event, and you may know John Holden, and you may know Tom Schneider, Tom with Riot.
Yep.
They actually both in their presentations referenced your organization as they spoke to about 100 people each in 2 different sessions there. And they've built a tremendous ecosystem. And obviously, the area is founded on that research triangle concept. But yeah, you should be proud that they both individually had brought your group up. But that said, last comments. What do you think is you talked about infrastructure, you talked about sort of some basic functions that are just brought together faster and cleaner, applying AI to it, the infrastructure management type things. Where do you see some of the early successes? We know the NVIDIA ecosystem and all that good stuff, but in the smart city space, where do you see these successes, where revenue is being generated and these companies stand a real legitimate chance of standardizing their applications?
Well, we've talked a lot about permit review, which is an odd one, but Svitak, which is a startup, just got a $1.2 million contract, I believe, with the city and county of Denver, and that's turning into real revenue and quickly. And I think that space is one that's set to continue to grow, and is one that every community in the country is responsible for doing. I think that the transportation space, there is a lot of opportunity in the ITS space. Pretty much every community in the country that has any sort of transportation management capacity is using sensors to control and potentially automate traffic conditions in one way, shape, or form. And there's a lot of money in that space. And so you're seeing companies like MyoVision and No Traffic and many others really beginning to grow beyond that startup and into a commercialization phase. And AI is a big part of that. But I will say that there is a lot of hype to AI, like there is any technology trend as it's new. IoT was similar, and automation and robotics. It took Waymo a very long time to get to where they are today. Even though back in 2016, when I was leading the autonomous vehicle program here in Colorado, everyone thought and companies were talking it would be 2018. Well, 10 years later, they are actually commercializing. And so I think what you're going to see with the AI space, like every other trend, is a million companies emerge. And it'll probably take an extra 5 years for things to really commercialize, but we will get there, and there will be money to be made.
Okay, well, Tyler, I really appreciate your perspective on how to drive innovation, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Peter.